Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Occult Think Tank. My name is Greg. In this program, I am going to talk about the three biggest cop-outs that Christians will try and use when defending their Bible. The first is the least likely to hear of, "That's a bad translation." This makes me want to ask the person, are you saying you're a linguist now? Which it would make me laugh coming from a Christian, because I would bet dollars to donuts most Christians haven't even read the Bible, let alone to know a particular language well enough to know whether or not something is a good or bad translation. The only time I accepted the idea of something being a bad translation was when I was interviewing Mark Powers. And he had pointed out that something was a bad translation because he knows Hebrew. And he is a Jew. So for him to say that something is a bad translation, he is qualified to assess whether or not something was translated correctly, or if something was a bad translation. Then we have, it's a matter of interpretation. This one I hear frequently, or you're interpreting that wrong. Either way, it is BS for what I do. Because a lot of times what I'm pointing out, I'm not interpreting shit. I'm showing you exactly what the words on the page say. I'm not reading into it to try and spin it any way. I'm just showing you this is what the fucking words on the page are saying. The fact that you may not like it does not affect the fact that it's what is there. Deal with the reality of what is in the book. Then the most common is you're taking that out of context. This is typically used the most frequent, but the person doing this is clearly showing that they do not understand basic sentence structure and how a thought is explained. Because one of the things that Christians will try and claim is that you have to read an entire chapter to know what the context is. That is bullshit. Because in a chapter, like the one you see up here, there are many thoughts being expressed. The whole chapter is not just one thought. In some places, like Proverbs, the proverb would be simply, basically 2 lines is the context of that proverb. It's not a matter of having to read the entire book in order to understand the context of a particular section. A section that you're zeroing in on. All you have to do is be able to recognize the subject, object, what is being discussed. Basically, you need to be able to break down sentence structure and identify where a thought begins and where a thought ends. This is what Christians are not doing, because they do not understand enough about how to look at something in context to take because a lot of times what you see them wanting to do is soundbite someone, much like what you see on television, that an interview that is done will be chopped so as to make it seem like the person is saying something that they're not actually saying. That is where you have to go from the beginning of the thought to the end of the thought and not chop it up. Because if you chop up and only take half of the thought, you're taking it out of context. You have to take it in the framework of the entire thought. But the entire thought is not an entire chapter. Because a prime example is the story that I'm going to be going into in this, that is told two different ways in the Bible. And I'm starting off with the least offensive way that it is being told. And the story, or proverb, starts in Matthew 25:14, where the character of Jesus, and I use the term the character of because I am not convinced that there was actually a Jesus that existed and so forth, that I do feel it is more than likely the character that you see in this book or the Bible that is called Jesus is at the most generous. It is a composite of multiple characters. But the subject of this proverb begins in verse 14. For the kingdom of heaven is a man traveling unto a far country, who called his own servants and delivered them his goods. This is the story of the talents. Unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, he gave another one, to every man according to his several ability, or servable ability. And then began his journey. Then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same, and made them 5 other talents. Likewise, he that had received 2, he also gained 2. But he that had received 1 went and digged in the earth and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants cometh and reckon with them. And so he that received the 5 talents came and brought the other 5, saying to the Lord, Thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 more. And the Lord said unto him, Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things, I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. So I guess if you're making money for this God, you're in his good graces. He that had received 2 talents came and said unto the Lord, Thou deliverest me 2 talents. Behold, I gained 2, and gained 2 other talents beside them. And the Lord said unto him, Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things, I will make you ruler over many things. And so forth. Then he which had received the 1 came and said, Lord, I knew that thou art a hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. I was afraid, and I hid the talent in the earth. Lo, there thou hast, that is thine. The Lord answered him and said, Thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knewest that I reap where I sowed not, and gather where I have not strawed. Ought thou therefore to have put my money to exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received my own plus with usury? And then take therefore the talent from him and give it to him which had the 10. This really, if you want to talk about, especially for the people today that want to talk about equity, this is also showing a very naive way of looking at investing. Because I want to pause here for a minute, even though we're going to rehash this story. I do want to point something out that is a core part of investing. If you're going to invest money, you should be aware that when you invest, you are making a gamble. You are risking the investment. There is a possibility of loss. What this parable does not go into is what would have happened if the person would have said, I took the 5 you gave me, invested it, lost 3, and only made 2. How would this Lord have reacted? Or I took the 5 and I lost them, because that's the nature of investing. That if you're investing money, you have the potential of risk. There is the possibility you're going to lose. There is no sure thing when it comes to investing. There is also no sure thing when it comes to crops. There are some crops that, because of either a shortage of rain or multiple circumstances, you can have a very poor crop or a very poor yield. That is not saying anything about the person that is trying to work the ground and work the crops. It is simply a part of life. But what I really want to point out and show is this Jesus is very big on getting usury. A preacher could give a full sermon on how the God of the Bible hates usury. What you're seeing now is, if you do a search in eSword on usury, what is pointed out over and over again is, like, take no usury from him, and so forth. Or if you're, like, for a Jew, if you're lending to a Jew, do not charge usury. Over and over again in the Old Testament, this idea of not getting usury, or not taking part in anything involving usury or interest. Or he that, like Proverbs 28:8, he that by usury and a just gain increaseth his substance, he shall gather it for him that will pity the poor. In other words, unless you're going to give money to the poor, the idea of getting usury is not seen as being good, except when it comes to Jesus. But then we have the New Testament, the Christian's version. And what you see, all of it in the Old Testament has usury in context with extortion and so forth, and incurring the judgment of the God. But when it comes to the New Testament, the perception and the idea of usury is much different, but it's only mentioned 2 different times in 2 parables that are essentially the same parable, but the one in Luke is absolutely vile. But that is the one that I will be focusing on now. Because in Luke, we have that parable starting in verse 12. And this one is not dealing with talents, but in pounds. A completely different currency, apparently. Which is really strange, given one is told in Matthew, another is told in Luke. If they were both told from the same Jesus, why is the currency that is being talked about a different one? That's the first thing that comes to my mind. Why would you not have talents and talents? But be that as it may. This one starts out, a certain nobleman went to a far country. And notice here, this does not equate this to the kingdom of heaven. Whereas in the other, it had equated it to the kingdom of heaven. And he called 10 servants and occupied them and delivered them 10 pounds and said unto them, Occupy until I come. Verse 14. But his citizens hated him and sent a message after him, saying, We will not have this man reign over us. Wait a minute. Now, the other one was equating it to the kingdom of heaven. Now, this one, my first question is, if these people don't like this person, number one, what did the person do to make them not like them or to hate them? Because hate is a very strong emotion. I very rarely use the term of hating someone because of how strong of an emotion that is. There are people I dislike, but that dislike is much different than hatred. Hatred carries with it, there has to be something that this person did in order to have citizens hate him. I just want to stress that, and this is coming from a Jesus, by the way. But then, it goes on to say, And it came to pass that when he was returning and received the kingdom, then he commanded these servants to be called unto him, to whom he had given the money, that he might know how much every man had gained by trading. Once again, just so everybody is clear, when you are trading money or you're dealing in investing, there is always, always, always the risk of loss. That aspect, the idea, the possibility, or even the probability of loss is not mentioned in any of this. I think it would be a very interesting thing, especially in the case of this one, that this person is hated by these people. Because bear in mind, what idiot would give money to those that hate them and expect them to invest their money wisely when they hate you? If somebody hates you, they're not going to give two shits about wanting to make you a profit. In fact, I would contend if people hate you, they would intentionally do things whereby the money you gave them would either be lost, or they would say, oh, trading was bad, I lost the money, and actually pocket it. After all, they hate you. But then came the first, saying, Lord, the pound that hath gained 10 pounds. And he said unto him, Thou good and faithful, thou good servant, because thou hast been faithful in little, little have thou authority over 10 cities. But I still say these people hate this person. But going on, the second came saying, Lord, thy pound hath gained 5 pounds. And he said likewise, be also over 5 other cities. So he's given away cities on this. But then another came saying, Lord, here is thy pound, which I have kept laid up in a napkin. For I feared thee, because thou art a austere man, or strict. Basically, you're a prick. You gathering where you don't lay down and reaping where you don't sow, which really goes against the idea in this bullshit Bible of you reap what you sow. If you didn't sow, you shouldn't reap, according to this shit. According to the shit this Jesus was saying in other places. If he doesn't sow, he shouldn't reap. But, and he said unto him, Out of thine own mouth I will judge thee, thou wicked servant. Thou knewest I was an austere man, or I'm a prick, or in more blunt terms, I'm an asshole. Wherefore then gavest thou my money into a bank, that on my coming I might have acquired with it usury. Once again, Jesus is very big on making him a prophet. And again, taking the 1 pound from the one that was afraid of losing it and giving it to the one that had the most. Which it really goes to show partially the sadistic nature, but the sadistic nature of Jesus comes in at verse 27, at the climax of this story. But those mine enemies that would not that I should reign over them, bring them hither and slay them before me. That is not even close to what was mentioned in the other place. And I don't remember off the top of my head where that was, so I will look up again. That was Matthew 25. Because at the climax of that story, it does say, and cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness, there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth, and so forth. Apparently, this shit is saying if you don't make Jesus money, he's going to send you to hell. Because this type of, now, outer darkness is not how it is described in other places. But the weeping and gnashing of teeth is a very common phrase for Jesus. He's very big on basically people crying and so forth, and gnashing of teeth. But what you have here are, number one, the same story told in 2 very different ways, but both of them culminating in showing just how wicked this character of Jesus actually is. What really does not go in line with the Jesus of peace and love, and so the big hippie Jesus, is Luke 19:27. But those mine enemies that would not that I should reign over them, bring them hither and slay them before me. That is on par with Hitler, not, or Pol Pot, or Kim Jong-un, or whatnot. Dictators. And let's just be clear. When you're talking about the Bible and the Bible God is a dictator. It's all a matter of how much do you do for the God, for that dictator. And for those that the dictator's happy with, I'm sure they would be looking at the dictator as being okay, even though they would know that if they step wrong or whatnot, that they could incur the wrath of this person, which would explain quite well, actually, why. But his citizens hated him. Because somebody is a dictator, citizens could be afraid and hate the dictator and do the shit and try to gain this dictator money in order to curry its favor, because otherwise it's going to fucking kill you. So that might be the only reason why they would do things to gain money for this dictator. And I guess this also does explain, if you would try and you would end up losing, well, this dictator would just kill you. And he would be, well, it doesn't actually say he will kill them. He's ordering others to kill them, slay them before me. He's not saying that he'll do it, but he will want them killed in front of him. This is a story of Jesus, Christians. This is not taken out of context. The context is what I'm showing you, this whole parable. This is the culmination of the parable. There's no two ways to do this. It is simply, Jesus is fucking evil. There's no other way to put it. But this is also what Christians do, is they will make up and try to use any method or means that they can in order to try and put their Jesus or the Bible in the best light as possible. But it really does not work when you look at it in the context of what is being said. Because if you look at the whole Bible and look at the story of that as told by Christians, it is vile. The idea that two people that didn't understand good from evil took an action that they didn't understand was good or bad, because they didn't know what good or bad were, and because of that, everyone that followed was damned, unless you had the blood sacrifice type of thing, whereby then all you have to do is think someone died for you, and what you do is washed away. So it doesn't matter how cruel and so forth you are to others, as long as you think Jesus died for you, that makes it okay. That is sick. That is showing you do not give a damn about anyone but yourself. And I contend somebody that would operate that way would certainly have people hating them. Not just disliking them, outright hating them. Because what they're doing is diabolical. Their mindset is all for me and screw you too. That can lead to the very strong negative emotion of hatred. And it is something I don't typically like the what did somebody do to cause someone to feel a certain way about them. However, when you're looking at the whole situation, it is easy to see why somebody would hate a ruler of this nature or a person of this nature. Somebody that behaves and acts in this manner, the manner that is described in the context of this parable. I can definitely see why people would hate them. Because what they are doing is not in any way, shape, or form loving. In fact, it is downright sinister. And what I would say is just straight up evil. Because especially when you're ordering the death of your enemies, that it just does not show an evolved higher way of thinking. If this God is that its thoughts are beyond ours, then this type of thought process should not even be possible. Because this is a very human, very dictator-like mindset. It is not something that is reflective of somebody that is a loving person or giving a message of peace and love. But I contend I could show over and over again where Jesus does not give a message of love. Like the statement of the idea that a man's foes will be of his own household, that think not that I've come to send peace on earth, I came not to send peace but a sword. That this Jesus came not for peace, but to cause violence and to cause conflict within one's own house. That makes Jesus evil. Jesus' own words make him evil. It is not a matter of interpretation. It is simply a matter of looking at the stories that he told. Oh, I'm sure there's a way you could try to twist your brain into a pretzel to explain this away, and I'm sure Christians have. But probably trying to act like, well, that's not actually Jesus talking. But as you can see here, this is the red letter shit. This is supposedly, the red letter is supposedly what came straight out of the mouth of this Jesus. If it came right out of his mouth, how can you not say this is his ideas being expressed? How can you try to distance yourself from something as vile as that? If your Jesus is saying, kill them before me, you can't. It's disingenuous to try and act as though he didn't say that, when I can show you right here, yeah, he sure as fuck did. And that was actually something that Mark Powers had pointed out and reminded me of, that the aspect of just aside from the fact that Jesus didn't fulfill any of the criteria for Messiah, this right here was enough for Mark to be, yeah, no. There is no way. Because this shows the heart of Jesus. And that heart is black. But feel free to leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section. Later, people.